It's our stories. Welcome to a world where real stories sounds like a movie script.
I used to believe that I was the protagonist of a charmed life. You know the type, the guy you secretly hate at high school reunions. I had the job at the architectural firm that put me on the partner track before I was 35. I had the house in the suburbs, a sprawling mid-century modern restoration that took me 3 years and half my savings to perfect. I had Leo, my 5-year-old son, who had my eyes and a laugh that could cure cancer. And of course, I had Elena. Elena was the kind of woman who stopped traffic, intelligent, fierce, with raven hair and a smile that she reserved just for me. Or so I thought. We were the power couple, the envy of the cul-de-sac. And intertwined in this perfect picture was my younger brother, Mark. Mark was the chaotic charisma to my steady stoicism. He was the failed musician turned bartender turned entrepreneur, always chasing the next big break, always short on cash, but always welcome at my dinner table. I loved him. I supported him. I cleaned up his messes since we were kids playing in the sandbox. The nightmare didn't start with a scream. It started with a whisper, a void where something should have been. It began about 6 months ago. At first, it was subtle. Cash for my wallet. I'm meticulous about my finances. I keep a mental ledger of every dollar. I'd withdraw $300 for the week, and by Tuesday, I'd open the billfold to find only $200. I blamed myself. Stress, I thought. Maybe I'd tipped the valet too much. Maybe I bought lunch and forgot. I started doubting my own sanity, gaslighting myself before anyone else had the chance to. Then the disappearances escalated. A bottle of 18-year-old Macallan, sealed and waiting for a special occasion, vanished from the back of the liquor cabinet. When I asked Elena, she rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with playful condescension. "Honey, you probably drank it with Mark during the Super Bowl and blacked out. You know how you get." I didn't get like that. I never blacked out. But the seed of doubt was planted. Was I losing it? Was early onset dementia a thing in my family? The breaking point, the moment the glass shattered in my mind, was the disappearance of the Omega Seamaster. It wasn't just a watch. It was a relic of 1968, a piece of steel and sapphire glass that had survived the jungles of Vietnam on my grandfather's wrist. It was the one thing I planned to give Leo when he graduated college. I kept it in a velvet-lined box in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, hidden beneath winter socks. I went to check on it one Tuesday evening, just to wind it, to feel the connection to the past. The box was there. The velvet cushion was there. The watch was gone. I turned the room upside down. I tore the drawers out. I stripped the bed. I felt a cold, hard knot of panic tighten in my stomach. This wasn't a misplaced item. This was theft, violation. I confronted Elena that night. I was shaking, not with rage, but with fear. "The watch is gone, Elena. Granddad's watch." She was removing her makeup in the bathroom unbothered. She didn't even turn around. "Dave, you probably moved it to the safe and forgot. Stop being so dramatic. We have the insurance audit next week. You're just stressed." "I didn't move it," I snapped, my voice echoing off the tiled walls. "Someone took it. The housekeeper? The gardener?" She finally turned, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Rosa has been with us for 2 years. She doesn't steal. You're being paranoid. Go sleep it off." That night, I lay in bed next to her, listening to her rhythmic breathing, staring at the ceiling fans slicing through the darkness. I felt like a stranger in my own home. If Rosa didn't take it, who did? A burglar who only takes one specific item and leaves no sign of forced entry? Impossible. The next day, I made a decision that felt slimy, like I was betraying the trust of my marriage. But the alternative, living in ignorance, was worse. I drove to a specialty spy shop 3 towns over, paying in cash so it wouldn't show up on the joint bank statement. I bought 3 4K cameras disguised as smoke detectors, high fidelity, motion activated, with a direct uplink to a secure cloud server accessible only via my phone. I installed them on a Monday morning after Elena left for her yoga class, one in the living room, one in the hallway, and one, God help me, directly above our bed in the master suite. I told myself it was to catch a thief. I told myself I wanted to see Rosa rifling through my drawers so I could fire her with cause. I never, in my darkest nightmares, expected to see what I saw. Tuesday, October 14th. That date is branded into my memory like cattle iron. I was at the office, sitting in a high-stakes meeting with potential investors for the new downtown skyscraper project. I was presenting the structural integrity slides when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. Motion detected. Master bedroom. Motion detected. Master bedroom. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was 11:15 a.m. Elena should have been at her mother's house for lunch. Rosa only cleaned on Thursdays. The house should have been empty. "Excuse me," I murmured to the board of directors, my face pale. "I have a security alert at my home. I need a moment." I stepped out into the sleek, glass-walled corridor. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. I opened the app. The buffering circle spun for an agonizing 3 seconds. Then the feed went live. The angle was perfect, high definition. The morning sun was streaming through the sheer curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The room looked peaceful. Then the bathroom door opened. My brother, Mark, walked into the frame. My brain couldn't process it. It misfired. Why is Mark here? I thought. Did he need to borrow something? Did he have a key? I never gave him a key. He was wearing a towel around his waist, just a towel. His hair was wet. He had just showered in my shower, used my soap. I felt a wave of nausea so potent I had to lean against the cold glass wall to keep from collapsing. Then Elena entered the frame.
She wasn't at her mother's. She was there. She walked in from the hallway, wearing a silk robe, my favorite robe, the one I bought her in Paris. She was holding 2 glasses of champagne at 11:15 on a Tuesday. She walked up to Mark. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness. This was a routine, a choreographed dance they had performed 100 times before. She handed him the glass, and he took a sip, then whispered something in her ear that made her throw her head back and laugh. It was a guttural, throaty laugh I hadn't heard in years. With me, she was always tired, always complaining about a headache or stress. With him, she was radiant. Mark dropped the towel. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. I watched, paralyzed by horror, as my brother, the man whose tuition I paid, the man I defended when our father called him a loser, picked up my wife and threw her onto our bed, the bed we picked out together, the bed where we conceived our son. The audio was crisp, too crisp. "God, I missed you," Mark groaned. "I know," Elena replied, her voice husky. "He's been so annoying lately, asking about the watch again, paranoid freak." "Did he find it?" Mark asked, pausing his assault on my wife's neck. "No, he thinks the maid took it. He's such an idiot, Mark. He's blind." I slid down the wall to the floor, my expensive suit bunching up, tears streaming silently down my face. I was watching my life incinerate in real time. Every thrust was a dagger, every moan was a gunshot. But it wasn't just the sex. The sex was animalistic, yes. It was passionate in a way we hadn't been in a decade. But the conversation that followed, that was the true execution. After they were done, they lay there, entangled in my high thread-gowned Egyptian cotton sheets, smoking cigarettes. We didn't smoke in the house. It was a strict rule. They were ashing into a cup on my nightstand. "So what's the plan for the holidays?" Mark asked, exhaling a plume of smoke towards the camera lens, unknowingly mocking me. "We have to go to your parents' house, pretend to be the happy family," Elena sighed, tracing circles on his chest. "But don't worry, the divorce papers are almost ready. I just need to wait for his end-of-year bonus to clear. It's going to be huge this year. Once that hits the joint account, I file. I take half the bonus, the house, and full alimony." "And Leo?" Mark asked. The silence that followed stretched for eternity. The air in the office corridor felt thin, like I was on top of Everest. "Leo is fine," Elena said dismissively. "Dave loves him. He'll pay child support through the nose. He'll pay for college. He's a good provider, if nothing else."
"It's kind of funny," Mark chuckled, a dark, sinister sound. "He's paying for my kid, raising my son while I get to be the fun uncle." My phone fell from my hand, cracking the screen against the tile floor. The world went silent. My vision tunneled. He's paying for my kid. Leo. My Leo. The boy with the slightly crooked smile. Mark's smile. The boy with the musical talent. Mark's talent. I didn't just lose my wife. I didn't just lose my brother. In that second, sitting on the floor of my office corridor, I lost my son. I lost my past. I lost my future. I picked up the phone. The screen was cracked, splintering the image of them laughing in my bed. I didn't rush home to kill them. The rage was there, yes, a white-hot inferno that wanted to burn the world down. But beneath the rage was something colder, something deadlier. I stood up, straightened my tie, and wiped the tears. I walked back into the boardroom. My colleagues looked at me with concern. "Is everything okay, Dave?" my boss asked. I looked at him, my eyes dead and hollow. "Yes," I lied, my voice steady as a surgeon's scalpel. It wasn't under control, but it would be. I wasn't going to get mad.
I was going to get even, and I was going to make sure that when the dust settled, they would wish they had never been born.
Driving home that evening was an out-of-body experience. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, the leather creaking under the pressure. Every mile marker I passed felt like a step closer to a war zone. I wasn't returning to my sanctuary, I was infiltrating enemy territory. I parked in the driveway and sat there for 10 minutes. I stared at the front door, the oak door I had sanded and stained myself last summer. Behind that wood lay the two greatest actors of our generation. I checked the rearview mirror. My eyes looked haunted, rimmed with red, but my face was a mask of stone. I practiced my smile. It looked like a grimace. I practiced again. Better. I unlocked the door. The smell of roasted chicken wafted through the hall. Domestic bliss. A lie wrapped in rosemary and thyme. "Honey, is that you?" Alina's voice called from the kitchen. It was light, cheerful, the voice of a woman who hadn't spent her morning destroying her husband's soul. I walked into the kitchen. She was chopping vegetables. Mark was there, leaning against the counter, sipping a beer. My beer. "Hey, big brother," Mark grinned, raising the bottle. "Thought I'd crash dinner. Alina said you wouldn't mind." The urge to grab the chef's knife from the cutting board and end it right there was so overwhelming I actually felt my arm twitch. I forced a breath into my lungs. "Of course not," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Always good to see family." I walked over to Elena. She tilted her face up for a kiss. I aimed for her cheek, barely brushing her skin. Even that fleeting contact made my skin crawl. I could smell him on her. Under the perfume, under the scent of cooking, I could smell the betrayal. It was a metallic, musky scent of deceit. "Rough day?" she asked, analyzing my face. "Excruciating," I replied. "You have no idea." Dinner was a masterclass in torture. I sat at the head of the table, Elena to my right, Mark to my left. Leo, my innocent, sweet Leo, sat opposite me.
I looked at the boy, really looked at him. For 5 years, I saw myself in him. I saw my father in him. Now, with the veil lifted, I saw the truth. The shape of the nose, the way his ears flared slightly. It was Mark. It was undeniably Mark. Every time Leo laughed at Mark's jokes, it felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. "So, Dave," Mark said, chewing with his mouth open, "Elena tells me you're thinking of upgrading the home security system, getting some alarms." My blood ran cold. Was he mocking me? Did they find the cameras? I looked up slowly, meeting his gaze. "Yeah, I've been feeling vulnerable lately, like people are taking things that don't belong to them." Mark didn't flinch. He just nodded sagely. "Smart. Can't be too careful these days. Lot of creeps out there." "Yeah," I said, slicing my chicken with surgical precision. "Lots of creeps. Sometimes they're closer than you think." Elena laughed nervously. "Okay, Cryptic, can we talk about something else? Mark, tell Dave about your new business idea." I listened to Mark ramble for 20 minutes about some cryptocurrency scam he was getting into. I nodded, I smiled. Inside, I was screaming. I was imagining the video playing on the wall behind him. He's an idiot. He's blind. That night, I initiated my plan. I couldn't sleep in that bed. I couldn't lie next to her knowing what she had done on those sheets hours ago. "I have a migraine," I lied, grabbing a pillow. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room. I need total darkness." Elena looked relieved. Of course she was. It meant she didn't have to pretend to want me. "Okay, babe. Feel better." I went to the guest room, locked the door, and turned on my laptop. I spent the entire night downloading the footage. I backed it up to 3 different hard drives. I encrypted the files. I created a digital fortress of evidence.
But the video wasn't enough. The video proved the affair. It proved the intent to divorce. But the paternity? That was hearsay. In a court of law, her comment about Leo being Mark's could be dismissed as a joke or pillow talk. I needed science. I needed biology to damn them. The next morning, I took the day off. Sick day, I told Elena. She didn't care. She was meeting Mark for lunch. I waited until she left. Then I picked Leo up from preschool early. "Daddy!" he yelled, running into my arms. I hugged him, tears stinging my eyes. I loved him. God help me, I still loved him. He was the victim in this too. "Hey, buddy," I choked out. "We're going on a secret mission. We're going to get ice cream, but first we have to play a spy game." I drove to a pharmacy 2 towns over. I bought a home DNA paternity test kit.
In the parking lot, I opened the package. "Okay, Leo," I said, my hands shaking as I held the swab. "Open wide. We have to get a DNA sample to see if you have superpowers." He giggled and opened his mouth. "Like Spider-Man?" "Exactly like Spider-Man," I whispered. I swabbed his cheek. I sealed the tube. Then I swabbed my own. I mailed the package with the most expensive expedited shipping available. The results would be online in 3 to 5 days. Those 5 days were a blur of agony. I was a ghost in my own life. I stopped eating. I lost 10 pounds. Elena noticed, but she interpreted it as stress from work. She was too busy planning her new life with Mark to notice her current husband was dying inside. I kept watching the feeds. It became an addiction, a form of self-harm. I watched them in the living room while I was working late. I watched them in the kitchen. I heard them discussing the timeline. "Christmas," Elena said one afternoon. "We'll do it after Christmas. Let him buy the presents first." "Ruthless," Mark laughed. "I love it." They were monsters. They had stripped away their humanity and replaced it with greed and lust. Finally, the email arrived. Subject: "Your DNA test results are ready."
I was in my office. I locked the door. I closed the blinds. The cursor hovered over the link. This was it, the moment that would define the rest of my life. If the test said he was mine, I would forgive the cheating. I would fight for custody. I would try to salvage something for the sake of the boy. But if it was negative, I clicked. The page loaded. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. The room spun. I actually gripped the edge of my mahogany desk to keep from falling out of my chair. 0. Not even a fraction of a chance. My entire fatherhood was a lie. Every birthday, every scraped knee I bandaged, every bedtime story, it was all a fraud. I had been raising my brother's son while he stood by and laughed. A primal sound escaped my throat, a low, guttural growl that rose into a roar of pure, unadulterated hatred. I swept my arm across the desk, sending the lamp, the framed photos, the stapler crashing into the wall. Glass shattered. I sat amidst the wreckage of my office, breathing heavily. The sorrow was gone. The confusion was gone. What remained was cold, hard clarity. I wasn't just going to divorce her. I wasn't just going to sue him. I was going to destroy them publicly. I was going to execute them socially. I looked at the calendar. November 24th. Thanksgiving was in 4 days. My entire family, my strictly religious traditional parents, my aunts, my cousins, everyone would be gathering at our house this year. We were hosting. It was perfect. The stage was set. The players were in place. And I had the ultimate weapon. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. "Jim," I said, my voice dead calm. "Prepare the papers. Fault-based divorce, paternity fraud lawsuit against Mark, civil suit for emotional distress. And Jim, make sure the process server is available on Thanksgiving Day. I want them served with dessert." The days leading up to Thanksgiving were surreal. I was operating on autopilot, fueled by caffeine and a darkness that had taken root in my soul. I was no longer Dave the architect. I was Dave the demolition expert, planting charges at the foundation of my own life, waiting to hit the detonator. I needed to be smart. Rage makes you sloppy, and I couldn't afford a single mistake. First, the finances. I took a half day and visited 3 different banks. I opened new accounts solely in my name, at a bank neither Elena nor I had ever used. I couldn't drain the joint accounts completely. That would raise red flags, and a judge might look poorly on it later. Instead, I moved my personal inheritance, money from my grandfather that I had kept separate but intended to use for a vacation home, into a trust. I legally firewalled every asset I could. I canceled the credit cards where I was the primary account holder, reporting them lost so new ones would be mailed to my office, effectively cutting off her spending power without an immediate alert. Then, the legal artillery. My lawyer, Jim, was a shark in a cheap suit. When I showed him the video and the DNA results, he didn't gasp. He just smiled a thin, predatory smile. "Paternity fraud is tough to prove for damages in this state," Jim said, tamping his pen. "But the video? The conspiracy to defraud you of your bonus? The admission that they waited specifically to secure funds? That's gold, Dave. That's malice. We can destroy her credibility. She won't get a dime of alimony. And Mark, we can sue him for alienation of affection and recover the costs of raising a child that wasn't yours." "Do it," I said. "Draft everything. I want the papers ready to be handed to them the second the turkey is carved." "You're sure about the party?" Jim asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's theatrical. Judges don't always like theatrical." "I don't care about the judge liking it," I replied cold. "I care about the truth. If I file quietly, she spins the story. She tells my parents I was abusive. She tells the town I abandoned her.
I need witnesses, Jim. I need my parents to see exactly who their favorite daughter-in-law really is. The nights were the hardest. I spent them in my study, working on a project. In reality, I was editing. I took the raw footage from the spy cameras, hours of it, and distilled it down to a 4-minute highlight reel of hell. I included the first kiss, the act itself, blurred enough to be legal, explicit enough to be undeniable. But the centerpiece was the audio. He's an idiot. He's blind. Leo is yours, Mark.
I added subtitles. Big, white, bold text. I wanted to make sure that even my deaf great-aunt Muriel knew exactly what was happening. I burned it onto a USB drive. I password protected it. I named the file Our Family Memories. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a gray, ominous sky. It fit my mood perfectly. Elena was in the kitchen early, humming as she prepped the stuffing. She looked beautiful. It made me sick. "Dave, can you get the extra chairs from the garage?" she asked, wiping flour from her cheek. "Sure, honey," I said. "Anything for you." Mark arrived at noon. He brought a case of cheap beer and a smug grin. "Happy Turkey Day," he bellowed, clapping me on the shoulder. I felt the heat of his hand through my sweater. I imagined breaking his fingers one by one. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mark," I said. "I have a feeling this is going to be one to remember." "Yeah?" he laughed. "Did you get the bonus?" "Something better," I smiled. A tight, dangerous smile. I got clarity. He looked confused for a second, but then Leo ran in and Mark scooped him up. "Hey, little man!" Watching my brother hold his biological son, my son, was a physical pain, like a knife twisting in my liver. I had to look away. By 2 p.m., the house was full. My parents, staunch Catholics who believed divorce was a mortal sin, were praising Elena for the beautiful table setting. My cousins were watching football. The smell of turkey and cranberry sauce filled the air. It was the perfect Norman Rockwell painting, and I was about to slash the canvas. "Dave, you've been so quiet," my mother said, cornering me in the kitchen. "Is everything okay?" I looked at her. She loved Mark. She loved Elena. This was going to break her heart, but it was necessary surgery. "I'm just reflecting, Mom," I said softly, "thinking about truth and family." "That's lovely," she beamed, patting my cheek. "You're a good man, David." We sat down for dinner at 4 p.m. The table was groaning under the weight of the food. Elena sat at the other end of the table, the perfect hostess. Mark sat to her right. I sat at the head. I tapped my glass with a spoon. Ding, ding, ding. The room went quiet. 20 faces turned to me. "Speech!" my cousin yelled. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my hands were steady. I held the remote control for the large 85-inch TV mounted on the wall behind Elena. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear. "Thanksgiving is about gratitude. It's about acknowledging the blessings in our lives. And it's about family. Hear, hear," my dad toasted. "But," I continued, my voice dropping an octave, "it's also about truth. Because without truth, family is just a word." I wanted to share a special video I made, a tribute to the year we've had, to show you all exactly what has been happening under this roof. Elena smiled, expecting a slideshow of Leo's soccer games and our summer vacation. She took a sip of wine. Mark leaned back, relaxed. I pointed the remote to the TV. "Enjoy the show," I whispered. And I pressed play. The video began with a black screen. Silence filled the room, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Then the timestamp appeared, October 14th, 11:17 a.m. The image flickered to life. The master bedroom. The angle was undeniable. Elena's smile faltered. She squinted at the screen. "Dave, what is this?" Then Mark walked onto the screen in a towel. A gasp rippled through the room. It wasn't a loud gasp. It was the sound of 20 people collectively sucking in air. My mother dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the fine china. On the screen, Elena entered. The robe dropped. "Oh my God," Aunt Muriel shrieked, covering her eyes. "Turn it off," Elena screamed, standing up so fast her chair tipped over. "Dave, turn it off. It's not what you think." "Sit down," I roared. It was a voice I didn't know I possessed, a command of absolute authority. "We are going to watch this. Everyone is going to watch this." Mark lunged for the remote. He scrambled over the chair, desperate. "You sick voyeur," he yelled. My cousin Mike, a linebacker for his college team, and a guy who always liked me better than Mark, stood up and blocked his path. "Sit down, Mark. Let's see the movie." Mark froze, looking at Mike's imposing frame. He sank back into his chair, his face draining of blood, looking like a corpse. The video continued. The sounds of their intimacy filled the dining room. It was grotesque. It was raw.
My father was staring at the screen, his mouth open, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. My mother was sobbing into her napkin. Then came the dialogue. The subtitles made it impossible to ignore. The idiot thinks he's getting a promotion. More money for us when I finally clean him out. I watched Elena. She wasn't looking at the screen anymore. She was looking at the floor, shaking, her hands gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles were white.
And the kid? He's yours, Mark. Look at his nose. He's all you. The room erupted. You whore, my mother screamed. My gentle, church-going mother stood up and threw her glass of water at Elena. It splashed across her chest, mixing with the tears streaming down her face. Mom, please, Elena wailed. It was a mistake. We were drunk. Drunk at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday? I asked calmly, pausing the video on a freeze frame of Mark wearing my grandfather's watch. You don't look drunk. You look calculating. I reached under the table and pulled out the manila envelope my lawyer had given me. I walked over to Mark. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at his plate, trembling. Here, I said, tossing the envelope onto his lap. What is this? He whispered. That is a DNA test confirming you are Leo's father, and a lawsuit for paternity fraud, and a restraining order, and an eviction notice for my life. I turned to Elena. She was sobbing, reaching out for me. Dave, baby, please, we can fix this. Think of Leo. I am thinking of Leo, I shouted, finally letting the rage crack my voice. I'm thinking that for 5 years I loved a boy who wasn't mine. I'm thinking that you let me raise him while you laughed at me with him. I pointed to the door. Get out, both of you, right now, or I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. The house is in my name. The locks are already being changed by a locksmith who is waiting in his van down the street.
You can't do this, Mark stammered. It's Thanksgiving. You stopped being my brother the moment you touched my wife, I spat. Get out. My father stood up. He walked over to Mark. He didn't hit him. He just looked at him with eyes full of tears and disappointment. You are no son of mine. Go. They left. It was a chaotic, weeping mess. Elena tried to grab Leo, who was crying in the corner, confused by the shouting. Leave the boy for tonight, my mother said sternly. You are in no state to drive him. We will call you tomorrow. Elena fled, sobbing. Mark followed, looking like a beaten dog. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, but also cleansing. I sat back down at the head of the table. The turkey was cold. The video was paused on the screen. I'm sorry, I said to my family, burying my face in my hands. I'm so sorry you had to see that. My dad walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. He squeezed it hard. Don't apologize for the truth, son. Never apologize for the truth.
The divorce was finalized last week. It was a bloodbath. With the video evidence and the DNA test, the judge had zero sympathy for Elena. I kept the house, I kept my retirement, I kept the bonus. Because of the paternity fraud, the judge ruled that I had no legal obligation to pay child support. Mark is now legally responsible for Leo. Mark is broke. His crypto scheme failed. He's working double shifts at a dive bar to pay the child support Elena is demanding from him. They aren't together. Once the money was gone, their love evaporated. They hate each other now, blaming one another for the ruin of their lives. The hardest part, the part that still wakes me up at night, is Leo. I had to say goodbye. I couldn't be his father anymore. It was too painful. And legally, I had no standing. The last time I saw him, he asked when I was coming home. I cried for 3 days straight. I set up an anonymous education trust for him. He'll get it when he's 21. It's the only way I can love him from a distance, without destroying myself. My house is quiet now. The camera has gone. The spot on the ceiling is painted over. I sit on my porch sometimes, drinking the Macallan I finally replaced, watching the sun go down. I am scarred. I have trust issues that will probably require years of therapy. I flinch when people get too close. But as I sit here, alone in the silence, I realize something. The silence isn't empty. It's peaceful. It's the sound of a life that is finally, brutally, mine again. And that is worth every penny of the price I paid.
Thank you for staying with me until the end. How would you have acted in the protagonist's place? Write your thoughts in the comments. More fresh and controversial stories every day on my profile. Like and subscribe to this channel.